The ML Sports Platter is back with you all over the major platforms. Download, subscribe, rate, and review. As this interview with Mike McAllister is brought to you by CH Insurance, in your corner every day, every way. Log on to chinsurance.cc today for personal and commercial insurance needs. You know Mikey, man, lead recruiting analyst for Orange Football, has covered the teams forever. Syracuse on 247, of course. Follow him on Twitter as well. Mike, welcome back. It's been way too long since I've had you on, my man.
It has, but there's a lot to talk about. So I think I'm pretty amped about the Syracuse football season, and it's one of the most anticipated seasons that I can remember in quite some time.
So it's funny that people just always think about the team, right, when it's this kind of hype and expectations. But I wanted to start with you personally before we break down the team for the 2024 campaign, because, you know, your brand, you're in recruiting. You've been covering this stuff. And by the way, I'm impressed that your head is still in place on your body, because I remember texting you months ago, you know, head on the swivel. I was like, Mike, I was checking in on you, man. How has it changed your job, right? I mean, it must be crazy following all this stuff. 3, 4, and 5-star guys, coaches and players from the South. Syracuse is now a big, you know, bullseye on the college football map. So for you personally covering this team in this sport, it's had to have had an impact on you, right?
Especially when Fran first took over.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you follow recruiting for an entire recruiting cycle. And by the time you start getting close to National Signing Day, you know who the players, for the most part, who are coming to Syracuse. There's a few that, you know, could decide on signing day or kind of deciding between a couple of players or a couple of teams and things of that nature that you're waiting on. But you know who all the players are.
Yeah.
When you have a coaching change like that, and then all of a sudden you've got Ohio State starting quarterback is visiting Syracuse, and Texas A&M's defensive end is visiting. And oh, by the way, all these 4-star receivers and other 4-star prospects are visiting as well. King Joseph Edwards, 4-star defensive end. And, you know, it kind of throws you for a loop, because it's almost like you're starting the recruiting cycle over with all of the new names that come up, but it's not just, oh, this player was offered and now he might visit. It's this player offered, he's visiting tomorrow, and he might commit by the end of the week. So, you know, it really rapidly ramps up the time frame of the whole recruiting process. There's new names bouncing around left and right. There are more rumors that makes it a little bit more difficult to discern what's real and what's not. And to be honest with you, that's kind of fun. You know, fans don't want the coaching changes to happen all the time, so you get to go through that. But that whole part of it from December to February was crazy and busy, but was also a lot of fun. You get to talk to a lot more high profile recruits as well with what Fran Brown has been doing.
What is it, though, about Fran Brown? We hear great recruiter, builder of men, culture, blah, blah, blah. What is it specifically that gets somebody from a hotbed in the South to say, I want to go here because of Fran Brown? I know there's coordinators, but Fran Brown is at the top here, right? And so what is it specifically about him? Because we heard all about it, and he's not delivered. He's over-delivered on all that. So what is it about him compared to some others that make people want to come?
He's just, you hear it all the time, but it's so true. He's such a genuine person, and he comes across that way. And as much as, you know, NIL is such a big factor in recruiting, and the potential to get to the league is such a big factor in recruiting, and, you know, facilities and what conference you play in and all those types of things, they all matter, right? But having a head coach who you genuinely feel like cares about you, your well-being, and your future, whether it's in football or not, makes a huge difference with recruits, not only when they're coming out of high school, also with their family. You think about parents are sending their kid to you. And so that makes a big impact on parents. But then also you establish relationships. You think about the fact that Fran Brown had a relationship with players currently on the Syracuse roster, LaQuint Allen, Elijah Clark, as a couple of examples. Now he shows up as the new head coach. Those relationships that he developed just by being a genuine person and showing genuine interest in them, even if he didn't recruit them to the school he was at, that ends up paying dividends down the road. That helped him with Kyle McCord. He had a relationship with Kyle McCord, even though he didn't end up following him when he first made his commitment to Ohio State. Same thing with Fidel Diggs. You establish those relationships. He's really, really good at that. And that ends up paying dividends down the road, whether it's high school recruiting, transfer portal, all of that. So it's just the genuineness of him as a person and the way he portrays himself and the way that he comes across as genuinely caring about every player that is coming to play for him.
Syracuse football insider and recruiting analyst Mike McAllister, our guest here on the Platter, brought to you by CH Insurance, always in your corner every day, every way. And I think that's another thing that people maybe don't talk about enough is with the NIL and the portal. It's like, oh, it's free agency. It's every year. It's this and that. But what people forget is for guys going out, the players who are coming in could also be guys who coaches have looked at since the 8th grade or 9th grade. And so they had, maybe you were 3rd or 4th on the list for Fran Brown at a Georgia, but you didn't go there. Well, Fran Brown's now at this place. They want another experience. Boom. And the recruiting thing keeps going. So that's definitely something to pay attention to. Cuse-wise, schedule, no Notre Dame, no Florida State, no Clemson, still really good to potentially great teams, elite. Let's reserve that for later. Va Tech, NC State, Miami, etc. I got to tell you, Mike, I think 4-0 right out of the gate. You got to beat Georgia Tech week 2. I think that's a crucial X factor game. Do you line up that way? Because I line up that way. And if they go 4-0, beat GT, Haynes King at QB and all that with a very, shifty, RPO kind of offense, I think Cuse goes 8-4, maybe even a chance for 9-3 this year. Where do you land on? I don't want you to win-loss it the whole way because nobody needs to do that. But just big picture, right? Because, you can't do that. It's injuries. You can't. It's football. But Big picture, target me a record based on what this looks like.
Yeah, so I kind of go under the assumption that they stay relatively healthy. And relatively healthy means the big players, the Kyle McCords
Right.
and Justin Barons and the, Marlo Waxes and all those guys, or Rondé Gadsden, all stay healthy for the whole season.
And they have more depth than the Babers time, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So that helps. But I think the biggest one that would be really, really tough to absorb would be losing Kyle McCord early in the season to an injury. That would be tough. But assuming, those doom and gloom scenarios don't happen, I totally agree with you. I think week 2 is such a huge swing game. You win week 2, you go into a matchup with Stanford for your 3rd game where you've got a lot of confidence after beating Georgia Tech. I think Georgia Tech's better than Stanford. Now, Stanford's still going to be physical. They're still going to challenge you at the lines of scrimmage and all that. But you blow out Ohio and then you beat Georgia Tech. That feels like that could give you enough momentum to beat Stanford in your 3rd game. And then we know almost regardless of what Syracuse has, they're going to beat the snot out of Holy Cross, right? So that sets you up for 4-0, and then you've got momentum, and then people start talking about you. And are you ranked at that point? Have you beaten 2 conference opponents already?
Yep.
A lot of things in play there. Whereas if you lose that game, then you're going to get some. They're going to say, "Oh, it's still same old Syracuse. It's still the 5-7, 6-6, maybe 7-5 Syracuse." Because they lost a week 2 home game against Georgia Tech. Even if people think Georgia Tech has the potential to be pretty good. And even with that, you still could have people sort of jumping off the bandwagon early. And then it makes Stanford such a huge game because you can't start 1-2. And so then it puts a lot more pressure on this team going into that Stanford game. Whereas it feels like if you beat Georgia Tech, you feel pretty good going into that Stanford game. And there's perhaps not as much pressure at that point. And then the middle part of the schedule is tough because you have so much on the road, right? You've got at NC State. You've got at Pittsburgh, at Boston College.
Yeah.
And then you get back to home, and 2 of your 3 toughest games are towards the back end of the schedule at home in Virginia Tech and Miami. Now, Miami could be a shell of itself by the time it gets there, as it has been the last few seasons, where they come in with a lot of hype, gets to the end of the season, they've got some injuries, and they're sort of hovering just about 500 or slightly over, and they're not, the top 20 team that a lot of people think that they could be. Virginia Tech, on the other hand, I don't think a lot of people are expecting to be a top 25 team right now, at least nationally. And I think by the time they get to that point, they could only have 1 or 2 losses and be a top 20-ish type team. I think that the way their schedule plays out and what they have returning, they've got the potential to be a really good team.
Yeah, Va Tech, Georgia Tech, they all have guys coming. I mean, they got a lot of guys coming back.
And mobile quarterbacks coming back with a lot of experience, too. So there's certainly challenges in the schedule. I agree week 2 is a swing game, but I've got them right around that 8-win mark. But I do think there's a potential to win one or two. If everything goes like exactly right, maybe you lose at NC State and then lose one of those games against a Virginia Tech or a Miami, get everything else go right and you end up at 10-2. I could see a scenario where that's not, crazy talk. And then we'll see where that lands sort of in the landscape of the ACC and nationally. But I think somewhere around that 8-win mark, anything there or above, you feel pretty good about year one at Fran Brown.
I know I said 10 minutes, but I got a couple quickies here. I got to keep you long. I haven't seen your face in a while. I miss you. Couple quick ones. I'll let you fly. New coaches, new players, new systems. That's a big thing. 4-2-5 for Robinson on the defensive side. I just had him on the show. On the offensive side, we're kind of wondering, right? I mean, we know systematically what the defense is. Everything has to fit with Marlowe in the middle, and you rush the passer, you cover the back end without having to do a too high shell, push it out the middle. But we know what it is supposed to be. If it works, okay. But offensively, what are we doing here? How much RPO? How much LaQuinn Allen? How much Gadsden? Is it X and slot and spread? And what is it going to be offensively?
We don't know. That's part of the mystery. That's kind of why the week one game is also extra exciting. We see glimpses of stuff during practice, but they don't show a ton in terms of what they're going to be schematically. And I think they like the fact that they have that advantage, so to speak, going into the season. And I don't expect that they think they're going to have to show all that much in terms of, the week one game against Ohio. I think they feel pretty good about the fact they'll be able to stay relatively vanilla so that going into week two, you'll have a lot that you haven't shown on film. But when we ask the question to any of the coaches, we get the same answer, which is whatever the other team can't stop. Right? So ultimate coach speak, and you love it in one sense, but it drives you nuts. Like I just want to know because I'm a naturally curious person and whatever. But I also understand that they think there's a benefit to us not knowing. That said, I think they're going to run the ball a lot. I think they feel like they've got two really good running backs in LaQuinn Allen and Yassine Willis, and they can utilize that to keep pressure off of Kyle McCord. And then I think you'll see them build off of that with some counters in terms of what they do in the run game, run stretch to the left 4 times and then do a counter to the right on the 5th one, stuff like that. I think you'll see a lot of play action, especially as they're having success on the ground and try to keep defenses off balance. So, that's kind of what I'm expecting. I'm not sure how much RPO you'll see. It did kind of sound like they've hinted at the fact that Kyle McCord might run a little bit more than what he has at Ohio State. But ultimately, I think they're definitely going to run the ball. They definitely want to control the line of scrimmage and then try to, develop the passing game off of that rushing attack.
Yeah, the offense sounds like when you ask somebody, hey, what do you feel like eating for lunch? I'll let you know when I'm hungry. It's kind of, we're going to have to wait for that. 60 seconds or so, I got you, and then we'll close. I know a game hasn't even been played. I know Fran Brown has jumped from a specialty coaching thing to a head coach. The expectations, the hype. We know the situation. Fran Brown has alluded to the fact that he loves SU history. He wants to be here. He wants to build this thing and sustain it for a long time. But let's be real. This is college football. Big money, big places, and you know exactly where I'm going with this, and you deal with this every day. If this thing takes off and he ends up, I don't know, in the college football playoff within a couple of years because it's expanded or something crazy happens, you really think this guy would stick around after all that? I mean, I'm not asking him to, tell me it's a dream job like Doug Marrone and go to I'm not saying, but really, I mean, come on, this is real world college football here. Do you think he is here to stay no matter what?
Everything that he has said has suggested that. Now, here's kind of the scenario that I've wondered. What if Syracuse does go 10-2? That gets them in the ACC championship game.
Right.
And they play Florida State or Clemson. And let's say they win that game. They win the ACC championship. Now you're in the playoff and you're a top 4 seed in the playoff. You don't think that major programs across the country are going to be trying to pound down his door and throw a bunch of money at him to lure him from Syracuse? They absolutely are. So there's 2 things here. One is, how serious is Syracuse about football? If you're trying to turn the corner and be a legitimate football school, when that happens, you have to be able to get close to what some of those big teams are offering. And what if Alabama has a terrible year under their new head coach year one? What if they go 7-5? And then Bama says, well, that's unacceptable. You're gone. Oh, Fran Brown took Syracuse to the college football playoff in year 1, and he was the best recruiter in the country at Georgia. Yeah, let's go get that guy. He's now proven he's had success as a head coach. We know he's an elite recruiter. He comes to Bama. It's going to take off. So we're going to throw $10 million a year at him to get him to come here. Something like that, because Bama's ridiculous with their money, right? I'm not saying Syracuse has to match 10, but you got to be able to come somewhat close, 6, 7, 8, something. To show him that we saw what you did year 1. We appreciate that. We want you here. And then I think you can come to some sort of agreement. If you just expect, well, we just signed him to a 4-year deal, so I gave him, we gave him money, and now other schools are throwing money at him, but we expect him to honor this, then you're not operating in the real world. And I think that's a situation where there could be some danger there. But everything he said, like I said before, he comes across extremely genuine. And everything that he has said is that he wants to be here. He appreciates the history here and likes the history here, and it's close to home. So I don't have any reason to believe that those words aren't true.
And after 1 year, Kellen DeBoer at Alabama, could you imagine that? I don't think they would do that, but I hear what you're saying.
But just as a scenario.
Yeah, I mean, within a couple years, I could see that. And by the way, Kellen DeBoer, he's won everywhere he's gone. So I feel like he's almost kind of like a Harbaugh 2.0, but we'll see what happens. This was great. It's been way too long since I've had you on. Mike McAllister covering the Syracuse football team, A to Z on the recruiting side as well. Nobody tops Mike's work, and go get him on X as well. Syracuse on 247 doing his thing. Mike, thanks so much for everything here, and I'll see you at the Dome real soon, my brother.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.